Davis steps under center. Gibson and McClendon behind him. Davis with motion by Richard. Will give the ball to McClendon. He leaps. Oh, he doesn't get in. He fumbled the football. Carolina holds. The game is over. And Carolina has won the game.
Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way. At the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory.
Left side of the line. Hood standing to Williams' right. Williams going to throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
Connor Barth for the possible win. Snap, spot, kick away, high enough, long enough. It's good! It's good! Carolina has won the game on a 42-yard field goal by freshman Connor Barth. Good gosh, dirty.
This is the Heel Tough Blog Podcast.
Hey guys, and welcome to the latest edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. Anthony Pagnotta here with you as always, and it is time for another recruiting edition of the podcast. So that means that Zack Hubbard is alongside of me. And Zack, the first time that we've had some significant news on the 2022 recruiting trail in a couple of weeks. So how have you been hanging in there over these last couple of weeks since we last talked to you, man?
Yeah, I've been doing well. Obviously, like most other Tar Heel fans, I've been sort of looking out for the little bits of news and information that we're able to get sort of still within the recruiting dead period. So glad that we have some information here, a commitment here within the past few days that we can discuss, and just a lot of different things with this 2020 class, or 2022, I should say, that we can, look over and discuss.
Yeah, and of course the big storyline that we'll jump into first here on the opening drive is that we will look back at the commitment of Malaki Hamrick, the Tar Heels landing one of the better pass rushers in the state over the last couple of years in Hamrick, committed to the Tar Heels over Ohio State and others that were inside of his Final Five that he released earlier this offseason on Friday, and the Tar Heels are getting a heck of a player, the number 150 overall player in the 2022 class, the number 12 outside linebacker in the class, and of course the number 5 player in the state of North Carolina in the 2022 cycle. Last year, the last year that he had played prior to, of course, his first game the other night on Friday, in 2019 as a sophomore, he had 129 total tackles, 39 tackles for loss, and 19 sacks. This guy is an extremely productive edge rusher that had a ton of success for Shelby High School in Shelby, North Carolina, one of the powers in the state. As a sophomore, was part of a young group of defenders that is only going to continue to grow when it comes to Shelby and be able to produce some other really talented guys, including another big-time target in the state for the Tar Heels in 2022 4-star defensive tackle prospect Santana Hopper. We don't know if this will help them with Hopper. Seems like it probably will. It also helps that, of course, Hopper has ties to the university through a couple of cousins, including one guy that is still playing there right now, and Tyrone Hopper. So, when you look at this commitment for Malaki Hamrick, though, what did you, when you look at him on film, what do you like about this young man, this, productive pass rusher, but a guy that maybe doesn't fit the body style that most people would look at when it comes to the production that he's had so far in his high school career?
Yeah, absolutely. And if listeners remember back to the episode where we sort of discussed our top 10, one thing that I think that we both kind of focused in on with Hamrick, who was on both of our lists, was his length. When you discuss prospects like Hamrick, and generally these elite athletes, one of the things that people that evaluate talent like to say is there's certain things that you can't teach. You can't teach speed. You can't teach height. Well, for Hamrick specifically, it's that you can't teach his length. Incredibly long, lean frame, incredible arms, which leads to somewhat of a lighter and smaller frame, but that does allow him to be quicker, sort of, go through the progression of his pass rushing moves a little bit quicker than your average edge rusher. And like I mentioned, just the length of his arms allows him to have that advantage over, probably what are going to be some smaller offensive linemen than he might see at the college level, but really allows him to thrive and dominate and get to the passer quickly, which is just one of those things that makes him, has him rated in the top 150 in this 2022 class.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. His length is definitely one of the more impressive parts of his physical build. And we saw that a couple years ago when we were looking at Desmond Evans, and you could see it already somewhat early on this year. It allows, him to be able to reach quarterbacks that some of the other guys wouldn't be able to when they're making moves on the outside to try to get to the quarterback. But the main thing that it does is that it allows you to help in the run game. It allows you to seal off the edge a little bit bigger or a little bit easier because you cover a bigger amount of space. So that's the thing that I think is interesting when it comes to him. I think, when you look at those numbers, it kind of shows that he is more of a straight downhill pass rusher, which, is something that I think is really due to the fact that the level that he plays at. Look, Shelby, they have some teams in their conference that are legitimate state title contenders every year, but still, the talent and skill there is a step above just about everybody else in their classification. So, what I'm trying to say is that a guy of his size will probably not be able to only play that role at the next level. So that's the one area when you talk about him that I think you're going to have to see, a little bit of a change when he gets on campus. Is can he add some weight, and can some of those attributes that he has right now, like the good speed off the ball, a really quick release off the line of scrimmage, I think that's the thing that really helps him get a good advantage when it comes to rushing against some of these more experienced and athletic offensive tackles that he does face and will face when he gets to the college level, is his quick release. Will that stuff remain when he puts on the weight that he is inevitably going to have to put on to be able to play the position? One thing that I noticed, though, about, when it comes to him putting on weight, you would think a guy that's as small as he is, he's probably just going to win just about every pass rushing battle off the edge based on, his speed and good release off the line of scrimmage. While that stuff definitely helps, he has shown on his film that he can play with the physical edge. He's not a guy that is afraid of contact. He has had moments where he is able to sort of push around some of the smaller offensive tackles. Now, of course, as as I said a minute ago, when he gets to the ACC, it's going to be a little bit different. But, I think that, that's an area where some people might be a little bit concerned about whether or not he has the physical edge because he hasn't had to use that much. Did you sort of witness the same thing that I did when you looked at his film, that there is a little bit of physicality to his game? It's just not used as often because of how thin he is and how many battles he is able to win with the speed off the edge?
Yeah, I definitely think that he's physical. Like I mentioned, this is an elite athlete regardless of size. The size is going to play a role, and it will certainly play a role in at the college level. And like you mentioned, we'll have to gain weight, the same as any other incoming freshman would. But definitely still a physical player. I think just more often than not, that physicality doesn't get as much of shine maybe as his pass rushing skills, just because he's probably not asked to do that as much as he's asked to do what he's more designed to do, which is rush the passer. So I certainly think that he has it. It just might not be his primary skill set. And you do see that with guys at his position, projected to be a rush-in outside linebacker guy. You have all sorts of different body types and skill sets with that you're using and rotating. as we've seen, this is a position that the staff wants to continue to add bodies and to add depth at. But you look at the guys that they have currently, guys like Tamon Fox, has played defensive end, so obviously we know that he can set the edge. But a guy that you mentioned, like Desmond Evans, really built more along the lines of Hamrick, where his primary strength is rushing the passer. So, I do think he's physical, like you mentioned, but it's really just a slight difference in play style between these edge rushing types, and I don't think it's any sort of slight for him not being, your traditional defensive end edge setter.
Well, I like the fact, when like you said, we look at these guys as probably being downhill rushers, but I do think that the staff is going to try to, focus on getting guys like Des Evans and in this case Malaki Hamrick, some of the other guys that may eventually come in this class coming up. Maybe they bring in another outside linebacker or future classes down the line to get some of those edge rushers, and they're going to want guys that can help seal the edge when it comes to, trying to take away some of these jet sweeps, trying to take away a lot of these runs to the C and D gaps that really hurt Carolina at times last year. That was one of the big things as the year went along, and some of their, these guys were out there for, just enormous amount of reps. I mean, you go back and look, really your defensive linemen were the guys that we were talking about a lot, with Tamari Fox and Raymond Volasic playing a lot of snaps. Of course, Volasic missing a game in there, so those snap totals were a little bit lower. But when you look at the outside linebackers, before we saw a little bit of the emergence of Des Evans and Chris Collins towards the end of the season, Tamon Fox and Tyrone Hopper were playing pretty much every snap out there. And as they got worn down, you started to see their struggles to be able to contain the edges, and that was, a problem in some of the games that we saw, primarily in some of the losses. Florida State, that was a really tough loss that we remember back to, and that was primarily because Carolina was unable to take away the edges. Same thing in that game against Virginia, and that's another thing that I think they're going to be working on with a lot of these guys that are coming in. One of the other big problems in that game, in both of those games actually, was the fact that Carolina could not contain running quarterbacks. So they, look, you want guys that are going to be straight downhill pass rushers, but you also want to have, those guys understand that in certain games when you're playing against mobile quarterbacks, sometimes that straight downhill mindset isn't always going to work in your favor because you're opening up holes that allow quarterbacks to take off. So that's where, when we talk about that length, when we talk about, the good speed and the different skill set that they possess than guys like Tamon Fox and Tyrone Hopper, that's where it's going to come into effect there. And I think Hamrick really fits that well. Again, I think everybody's going to be talking about his size because he comes in, he's very thin. I mean, if you turn on your film, you would think that you're watching maybe even a safety that's playing outside linebacker. He is pretty thin, but I think that there is enough talent there that it's not just going to disappear if he puts on the weight. And I think the other thing that people have to realize is that those edge rushers, you're not going to see those guys be as big as guys like Tamon Fox, or they'll probably look a little bit more like what we saw from Des Evans this year, what we saw Chris Collins at this year, probably in that 245, 250 range, as opposed to some of these bigger guys. Tamon Fox is just a guy that's a really, really good pass rusher, and they've got to find a way to put him on the field. They felt that he's going to be more effective on the edge because of his nose for the quarterback, and I think it's the right move, but these guys are starting to mold to what Jay Bateman wants in his outside pass rushers. So really excited about what Malaki Hamrick brings to the table. And one of the big things about Hamrick is that he is the Tar Heels' first commitment in the state of North Carolina, and that's where we're going to start here in our true fall segment here tonight. There was an article that was written a couple of days ago, I believe. I think it was either on Tuesday or Wednesday. I didn't see it until last night, but it was written by Brad Shepard, who does a fantastic job over at 24/7 Sports, covering, the Southeast area, and also covers the South Carolina Gamecocks in depth. He was talking about the states with the most talent in this 2022 class, brought up the state of North Carolina, had him at number 9 on his list. And, rightfully so. This is another talented class in the state. Not as talented as a year ago, but pretty close. It's one that, I was talking about it when we first, were talking about this class, and I said that the state of Virginia was going to be a huge focus because it wasn't going to be a great year in North Carolina. I think I was underestimating just how good this class is going to be, but one thing that Brad Shepard did mention in the article is that he said something that I want to put in here, which is that Carolina is off to a slow start in the state of North Carolina. So my statement to you, Zach, and just again, we've played this before, either true or false, and then you'll explain, of course. We should be concerned about the fact that the Tar Heels are off to a little bit of a slower start in the state of North Carolina than they were a year ago.
I would say that statement is false, primarily for the reason of the dead period that we've had since almost a year ago. It seems like, I believe it was last March that they sort of enacted that dead period. These kids, for the most part, have not been able to take in-person visits to campus. That so many of the 2021 kids actually were able to before that dead period went into effect. So a lot of these 2022 prospects are, you're seeing commitments here and there, but specifically within the state of North Carolina, we've not seen a lot of these top guys really go ahead and commit. Looking over who's currently within even the top 1,000 rated kids per the 247 composite. There's only 2 that have committed so far. One that's committed to North Carolina and Malaki Hamrick, and another committed prospect that North Carolina will still recruit, and 4-star tight end Benji Gosnell. So, the state of North Carolina as a whole has not seen many commitments, and I don't think that is, a slow start for North Carolina. I don't think it's a slow start for anyone, just because that's going to be the name of the game for the most part in 2022 recruiting until these guys are able to get on campus, take visits, not only for the prospects to see these campuses, but for the schools and for the coaching staffs to see these kids in person. The coaching staff at North Carolina wants to see some of these kids before they go ahead and accept a commitment. So I would say false. I don't think that North Carolina has had a slow start so far in 2022, but I'd love to hear what you think.
I don't think that the Tar Heels have had a slow start in the class. I think that the state of North Carolina as a whole has definitely had a slower start in terms of the amount of commitments that you're seeing early on. I feel like a lot of guys last year had a really good connection with their schools off the bat, and I think you brought up a really great point and something that is definitely true. The fact that these guys are not allowed to go on campus unless they take self-guided tours, which just we haven't seen a lot of them. People are still being a little bit cautious, and I think part of it is that it's just not the same experience. You want to be able to have a coach walk you around campus, show you different spots that you probably won't come across if you're just going through by yourself or even being guided by a commit that has only been there a couple of times. So I'm not too concerned about it. I think, if you were seeing a lot of those guys that were towards the top of the state in terms of the rankings committing already, and you were missing on a lot of those guys, you'd be concerned. I know that the article did mention that, of course, there is some concern with Jalen Walker, who is going to commit at the end of March, which we'll talk about here in just a second. The article seems a little bit concerned for the Tar Heels in the fact that they do believe that right now Travis Shaw is favoring Clemson over the Tar Heels, which is not an unpopular opinion, but I think at the same time, Shaw's kind of denounced some of those rumors. I think he still feels like he's still in the early processes of his commitment. I think that there's still a ways to go for him. He really mainly just wants to get back on some of these campuses a few more times before he makes his decision. So, I'm with you. I'm going to say false. I'm not not really that concerned yet, but this will be something that I think as the cycle goes along, it will be interesting to come back and visit, especially if the Tar Heels do miss on Jalen Walker, if the Tar Heels were to potentially miss on Travis Shaw, then there might be a little bit of concern here. But it could also go in the other direction where if the Tar Heels were able to land Travis Shaw, if they were able to potentially pull off Jalen Walker, something like that, then there's definitely, more talking about whether, or not anybody can really challenge Carolina in the state. Is this, the new thing that's going to happen in the state of North Carolina where all of the top guys are going to go there, not just, some of these guys that are inside of, the top 300 but not quite top 100 prospects? Has Carolina finally been able to take over Clemson's dominance in the state? Those are the types of things that we'll be talking about, so it'll be interesting to monitor. Speaking of Jalen Walker, he did announce earlier this week that he is going to make his commitment on March 28th, which is a Friday before one of his high school football games. I believe it could be afterwards. Not sure how they're going to do a lot of that stuff this year, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. But Carolina won of the final 6 for him. Of course, he announced that back in November. A really, really stacked group that Carolina is going up against here. Clemson's the team that everybody has been looking at as the favorite for a while now. Ohio State has sort of creeped in there as well. They've made a push for him, but they haven't made as big of a push as Georgia has, another team that he has a really good connection with that is built over this time. And then, of course, Carolina is in there as well. There are a couple other schools. I know Alabama is on that list, and I believe maybe South Carolina is the other team that's on that list. I don't have that graphic pulled up in front of me as of right now, but the statement that I want you to react to is that the Tar Heels are still a competitor for Jalen Walker's commitment.
I would say that one is tough. I would say very slightly true. I do think that the Tar Heels are still a competitor because in my opinion, they are going to continue to recruit him up until the point that he commits, and likely, along with other top prospects that we've seen commit elsewhere in the prospect and in elsewhere in the country, in previous years, a guy that they'll likely continue to recruit. So I still think they're definitely a contender, and I still think that Jalen is listening to those advances. Like you mentioned, is planning to take a quote-unquote quarantine visit, a self-guided tour of Clemson, I believe either this weekend or next, if I'm not mistaken. Leading up to the weeks before his commitment, obviously we've seen the crystal ball with 247 and the FutureCast with Rivals sort of swing towards Clemson. And, as we've discussed numerous times, Clemson being sort of one of those top teams within the nation year after year, being a continual playoff contender, it's not exactly surprising that they're going to be contending for top guys sort of within their geographic area. Specifically in this instance in North Carolina. So, it's one of the major sticking points for North Carolina in recruiting to win sort of these battles. At this point, I can't confidently say that North Carolina will. North Carolina probably would not be my projection as of today. As sort of reading the tea leaves, it does look like that Jalen is leaning towards Clemson heading into his announcement. But like I said, I would still say that the Tar Heels are going to be a contender, and maybe they make sort of a last-second sprint to the finish line here and pull out the lead. Not my projection per se, but I do still think they're a contender.
Yeah, I think, everything is kind of in fluctuation with where we're at in terms of not being able to get on campus with coaches, not even really being able to be in contact with coaches during this dead period. So I think that with these decisions, you have to slow play where you're at with your own predictions, even some of these crystal ball predictors. We've seen a lot of guys that have cast, some crystal balls the month of, and couple days before the announcement, they end up changing because things can change just that quickly with these guys. By the way, Auburn, instead of South Carolina, was the other team that was in there, but doesn't seem like they're a real big competitor. It feels like it's coming down to Clemson, Georgia, and Carolina in this one. I'm gonna go with you here. I'm gonna say true. If this was if we were doing this podcast in a few days, because I believe it's going to be either sometime over the weekend or early next week, he and Travis Shaw are actually, according to some rumors, are going to be taking a visit down to Clemson together, where they're going to self-guide themselves around campus. If you told me that, then yeah, I would probably say that it would be false. I'd probably switch my answer if that visit ends up going well. But there is no guarantee. I know that in one of the more recent articles that I read about Jalen Walker, they did say that he is going to attempt to try to take a visit to Carolina before he makes his decision. Now, it's probably a little bit easier than even Clemson or Georgia. So I would expect that if there is still some doubt in his mind after that visit to Clemson, he will definitely take a visit to Carolina. I think even if he does have a great visit to Clemson, he may even still take a look at Carolina. But, yeah, I'm going to go with true, but I think you're right. I think right now there is definitely a pretty strong feeling that he is heading to Clemson as of right now, and the Tar Heels are going to need a little bit of a miracle here to be able to pull this one out. But look, Mack Brown has done a lot in this state over the last couple of years, so you can never really count him out in any of these recruitments. So let's go to another one here, another big-time target for the Tar Heels in the 2022 class. He released his top 14 the other day, but if you read the Weekly Storylines article a couple of weeks ago, or if you read the Rivals.com article that we were talking about in our Weekly Storylines, they did say in one of their recent rumor mill pieces that Jake Pope, the three-star safety out of the state of Georgia, is strongly considering the Tar Heels. Tar Heels made, of course, his top 14, but they did say that there are 5 schools that are standing out for Pope at this point, and the Tar Heels are one of those teams. So, Zach, the Tar Heels are a serious contender for Jake Pope. Do you think that's a true or false statement?
I think that's very much true for several reasons. Sort of the doubt around him, and obviously Jake is a guy that was an early Tar Heel target, but sort of the doubt came from sort of a flurry of offers that he's gotten within the past months. Mainly Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State are 3 really big ones that he's gotten recently. Also, to mention there, for one of those 3, Alabama, he did actually take a self-guided tour there back in February. So obviously does have interest in programs that are heavy recruiting hitters and would be serious challengers for North Carolina. With that, though, at least at this time, based on all the information that I've been able to gather, it does not appear that really any of those schools that have offered him are heavily pushing him or are recruiting him as hard as the Tar Heels are. Likely all 3 of those schools, as well as these other sort of, national powers that I mentioned, probably looking to get him in some sort of camp scenario and see him there, while, North Carolina, for the most part, it seems, has already made up their mind. Obviously, a favorite of defensive coordinator Jay Bateman, who is also the safety coach, so would be the position coach for Jake. I think that the Tar Heels are in a really, really good spot, seeing as they're the team that's probably pushing the hardest out of this list, while also being, one of the higher-ranked teams in terms of the, national perception of them at this time. So I have to go with true. I think that North Carolina is a very big player in this recruitment. I would not quite say favorite as of yet. I think that his recruitment is still a little bit in its infancy, but definitely has to be high on that list, if not the favorite.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would say true. When it comes to favorites, I mean, look, whenever Alabama offers you, that definitely carries some weight at this point. You mentioned that he took a self-guided tour there, so clearly that's one of the teams that he favors. One of the other teams that I've seen him closely tied to, a lot of their sites have written a lot of articles about him and everything like that. I think he has a pretty good relationship, from what I've read in that, with their secondaries coach, is Notre Dame. So those are the 2 that I would probably say right now are probably his favorites. Of course, Georgia, in-state, going to have a lot more access to him. He's going to have a lot more access to their campus over the next couple couple of years, especially if this was to continue for a few more months. The dead period, it probably favors them a little bit more. But I do think that the Tar Heels are a competitor here, and I think this is another recruitment that kind of shows how the Tar Heels, even though this is considered in the footprint, which Mac Brown laid out during the early signing period press conference a couple of months ago, this falls in that footprint. Carolina is starting to grow a pretty solid reputation throughout the country, and this is another recruitment that shows it. There are some really significant teams that are in this race right now. This is a guy that I think once he gets to some of these camps and some of these other sites can see him, because I believe 24/7 Sports has him as a 4-star, but he's listed as a composite 3-star because some of the other sites aren't quite as high on him. When he gets to some of these camps, this guy will be a 4-star prospect. I've seen him a couple of times, watched a couple of his games. He is a pretty complete package at safety. He really just has to put on, a little bit more muscle to be able to handle some of the more physical offensive linemen that he'll face whenever he plays in the box. But other than that, he's a pretty complete prospect. And for the Tar Heels to be in this, and I think being seriously considered, is huge. Like I mentioned, though, I think that right now Alabama and Notre Dame are probably the two teams that hold a little bit of an advantage. But I definitely think that the Tar Heels right now can be considered a serious contender, and there's still some time in this recruitment. I mean, look, I think that maybe he's definitely a little bit further along in his recruitment than a top 14. I know that's what he released the other day. I definitely feel like there's some teams that are standing out to him, and he's a guy that could narrow that list down further at any time, could get close to a commitment really at any time. But I still feel like there is a little bit of time left, and that the Tar Heels, if they can get him on campus when things open back up, that could be really huge for them. But yeah, I agree with you. I do think that he is that the Tar Heels are a serious competitor for him. How about one at the position that we were talking about a little bit earlier? I think mainly when you look at the edge rusher position, there is another guy in state that the Tar Heels have yet to offer, but that people are really high on. The recruiting rankings are really high on. So far, NC State off to a good start with him. A couple other out-of-state schools off to a good start with him. Torrin Wright is a guy that a lot of people, I think, are kind of wondering if he'll end up getting an offer. But my thing here, my statement here that I want you to answer is the Tar Heels will add another edge rusher in this class to go along with Malaki Hamrick.
With that question, I would say true. Definitely true. I mean, you have sort of these fifth-year seniors that you have on the roster in Tamon Fox and Tyrone Hopper, but I think that they definitely want to, add some guys along with them to add some depth there. I think this is a position that they want to continue to recruit at, want to stack talent on talent. It's really one of, 2 to 3 defensive positions that when you look at just overall team construction or the NFL draft, there's really 3 main defensive positions that they are looking at as being sort of more important than all the rest. That'd be cover corner, probably interior pass rush, and then edge rusher. So, with it being such an important piece within any defense that you have, I think that they definitely will add another one. Obviously, some more names to mention there as well. I think that's one of the main reasons that they'll add one is there's still quite a few names outside of the one that they haven't offered quite yet in Torrin White. But, I mean, you look at other linebackers within their footprint. You mentioned a guy like Xavier Simmons has that potential to play edge rusher, inside or outside linebacker, as well as Albert Red, another Tar Heel State native, and then some guys from sort of outside the state in a Virginian, Bryson Jennings, and then a prospect from Georgia in Joshua Joseph. So still quite a number of guys on the board. So I think yes, true, they do add at least one additional outside linebacker. I'm not going to go so far as to say 3 as of yet, but I definitely think that they take 2 in the 2022 class.
Yeah, I would say as of right now, true. I don't know exactly who it's going to be, but I think that the later that they get into the class, the more guys that commit, this statement could end up changing to false. I think that it's an area that they would like to add another guy at if they have the room for him, but this is going to probably be another smaller class because you're not going to have as many seniors that are going to leave. I mean, still, you're going to have a pretty decent sized senior class, but the extra year of eligibility did throw a little bit of a loop into this class and probably means that they are going to take on another smaller class here. So I think that is going to play a role here, but I would go with true as of right now. I do think that at some point, Torrin Wright will probably get an offer here from the Tar Heels. I like you mentioned Joshua Josephs. That's probably a guy that a lot of people don't know about. Already played his junior year of high school football at North Cobb High School in Kennesaw, Georgia. A guy that'll probably start to move up some of those boards as they start to see him a little bit more. Bryson Jennings, yeah, he's a little bit of a mystery out of the state of Virginia. One of those guys that I think is a pretty highly rated prospect that nobody really talks about. He's a 4-star prospect inside of that top 500 that we've been mentioning a lot over the past few months, and is definitely a guy that I think the Tar Heels, with their success in the state of Virginia, could have a chance with if they turn up the heat a little bit. And also another one that you didn't mention there, but that we've seen sort of at least respond to some of the stuff on social media, usually post whenever the Tar Heels send out graphics and stuff to him, is Dante Anderson from the state of Florida. Now, again, he's right in Miami's backyard, so that's going to be an extremely tough one for the Tar Heels to navigate there. Miami already with an early crystal ball prediction, although the confidence on that one is a little bit low. You still feel like that is one that's going to be a little bit tough for Carolina to go in and get, but it feels like that's an area where the Tar Heels have seen some pretty decent success, and if they want to go get somebody else, including potentially a bigger name, they would have a chance to land one in this class. So yeah, I'm going to go with true as well on that one. And then our final question that we'll talk about here, I asked if they'll land another outside linebacker in this class. How about another position where they don't have a commit just yet, but they did see one of their biggest targets go off the board the other day? The Tar Heels will land a quarterback in the 2022 class. Do you think that statement is true or false?
I think that is true, just with the state of college football as it stands now, with the expansion of the transfer portal as well as, potentially upcoming one-time transfer rules being enacted in college football. The concept of transferring within college football is going to explode over the next few years, and it's basically already been that way for quarterbacks. We've seen quarterbacks, transfer all over the country for the past 3 or 4 years, and they've basically all been eligible to play immediately, so there's really not any barrier outside playing time for a guy to, if he's not playing, if he doesn't like his position on the depth chart, to up and go somewhere else. So pretty much every program, especially those that are trying to compete at a high level, that are trying to compete for conference titles and national championships, want to stack talent on talent if available, or at least get guys, have bodies in that room. So yes, I do think that North Carolina will likely get a quarterback within the 2022 class. Like you mentioned, did have one of their top targets in 4-star out of Texas, Cade Kublik, committed to Clemson after Clemson's number 1 target, Ty Simpson, committed to Alabama. That's how those dominoes went. But you look at another guy that North Carolina has on the board, in Braden Locke, a 3-star also out of the state of Texas. They're very much in that one, battling Miami there right now, but Miami's trending for some other quarterback targets, including a 4-star out of Georgia named Curry Brown. So, with that, I think that they already have Braden as sort of one of their primary targets there at the position. I imagine that they will continue to evaluate and scout, might see some additional offers go out just to make sure that they have some options there. But if I had to guess, it's probably more likely than not that they sign a quarterback in the 2022 class.
Yeah, I'm going to go false here. I'm going to be honest. I think you look at Locke, that's probably the only guy that you would be confident that the Tar Heels have any shot with at this point. And part of that is because everybody else that they've offered so far in the class is committed. Now, look, Ty Simpson was a bit of a pipe dream. Cade Klubnik was even a bit of a pipe dream. But, Klubnik, I thought that was something that might have been pretty revealing in terms of if they do go out and try to spread some offers around, they may do it nationally. Because if you're just looking in the state of North Carolina, this is a very quiet year for the state of North Carolina. Now, next year is a little bit different, and I think that is also playing into why they may not get a quarterback in this class, because next year you've got a couple of guys in the state that are going to be big-time names like Tad Hudson. I think that's the one that jumps off the page the most to people, mainly because he already has a Tar Heel offer, but there are some other guys in the state of North Carolina at quarterback in that class that I think are going to become some pretty significant names as we go down the stretch. The main one being Aleem Appler, who plays at New Hanover High School out on the coast and is an extremely talented quarterback in his own right that has already heard from some of the bigger teams around the entire country. So I definitely think that the Tar Heels are going to continue to pursue a quarterback. I think as of right now, if they are going to get one locked, looks like one that they do have a fighting chance with if they want him. But I would say, I'm going to say false right now. I think that the 2023 class is the next time that we'll see them land a quarterback. The good news is that as of right now, the Tar Heels seem to be in a pretty good spot at that position with, of course, Sam Howell coming back next year. And the fact that you do have Drake May behind him, as well as Jacoby Criswell, who I think, a lot of people are kind of counting out. A lot of people think he may even look to transfer if he ends up losing that backup job to Drake May. Well, Drake May is an extremely talented quarterback, but so is Jacoby Criswell. Remember that when Jacoby Criswell was coming out of high school in Carrollton, Arkansas, he was, or Morrilton, Arkansas, excuse me. He was compared to Sam Howell. That was the comparison that was given to him by 24/7 Sports. And there were people that thought that he actually fit this offense even better than Sam Howell did. So don't count him out just yet. And if he ends up staying, that means the Tar Heels would have 3 quarterbacks already on the roster. So I think 2022 might be a class where they don't take a quarterback, but I don't think it should be something to worry about. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. We'll close it down, though, with the 40-yard dash, which will give you a couple of headlines around the Tar Heel program. It's time to take a look at some of the latest storylines around Tar Heel football with the 40-yard dash. And so, with the 40-yard dash, there are a couple of interesting headlines. Again, it's been relatively silent over the last couple of weeks, but going away from the recruiting for just a second, the Tar Heels, of course, have 5 guys that are pursuing NFL careers, and they're right now in a pretty good spot with all of that, as all 5 guys received NFL draft combine invites. Now, of course, the combine this year not going to go off. Mainly, the reason that they received the invites is they're going to be, a better chance to be recognized by scouts when they go through their pro day, because, they will know that this will basically be the only time they'll get a look at them, as opposed to the normal combine. You go to Indianapolis, everybody's there, a lot of the scouts are there, so they get to see you then. If they really don't want to see you again on a pro day, they don't have to. And the other reason why this is big is because there is a chance that later on, they're looking probably sometime around April, right before the draft, they will allow some of these teams to bring some of these guys to Indianapolis and interview these guys. It may not be all of the guys, so a guy like Daz Newsome, who's considered a late rounder, might not be one of those guys that goes, but some of the other guys like Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, some of the ones that are seen as potential second rounders or third rounders will probably get to interview with some of the teams. That's what'll be the big boost there for them. So congratulations to all 5 of the Tar Heel prospects: Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, Chaz Surratt, Daz Newsome, and De'Ami Brown for all receiving combine invites. This year's early enrollees, they received their numbers last Tuesday. Some interesting ones that were handed out. I was wondering, whether or not, because the number was available on the offensive side of the football, whether Caleb Hood would potentially take his dad's old number. Of course, Errol Hood, the former cornerback who wore 29, he will not. Instead, he will wear number 4, which was vacated this offseason, of course, by Toe Groves after he transferred. Drake May, he will not wear his dad's number either. Instead, he will go with number 10. Ty Chandler, the Tennessee transfer, he wore 8 at Tennessee. That number is going to be Kobe Pacehours, though, so he's going to go with number 19, which was the number that he was wearing in the edit that was put out of him earlier in the offseason when he committed to Carolina, as well as some guys on the defensive side of the football. One thing that's interesting for the defensive linemen, both of the guys that early enrolled will be wearing single-digit numbers. So you got Javari Ritzie who's coming in. He's going to wear the number 5. Keyshawn Silver will wear number 6. And then some of the other guys that we hadn't mentioned just yet, Gavin Blackwell, he'll take over De'Ami Brown's number 2. J.J. Jones takes over Daz Newsome's number 5. And, of course, Ra Dilworth, we thought maybe he would be able to potentially get his number 8, maybe from Kadri Jackson. That's not going to happen. He's going to go with number 11 for this season. DeAndre Boykins will wear number 24. Power Eccles, number 23. Dontavius Nash, number 21. And Diego Pounds keeps his high school number 61. So a couple other key notes getting back onto the recruiting trail. One of the guys that we didn't talk about, or actually 2 of the guys we didn't talk about, we'll go with the 2 offensive tackles that narrowed down their list earlier this week. Start with 2022 4-star offensive tackle out of the state of Georgia, Kayshawn Sapp, released his final 8 schools. That's been a recruitment that's moved along extremely quickly over the past couple of months. He really took off after his junior year in the state of Georgia, and he already looks like he's getting towards the late stages of his recruitment. The Tar Heels are one of those 8 teams in there, but I'm not really sure where the Tar Heels are at in this recruitment. This feels like one that we just don't have a ton of information on because of how quickly he's moved during this time. And, he's a guy that's probably just going to narrow his list down, get himself to an area where he can take some visits when things open back up, hopefully after May 31st, which is when the deadline is extended to right now. But we'll just have to wait and see on that one. He wasn't the only offensive tackle target that the Tar Heels were able to make a final list for. Final 15 released by 2022 4-star offensive tackle Dane Shore on the same night earlier this week on Sunday. Of course, he played in Alpharetta, Georgia for the first 3 years of his high school career, transferring to IMG Academy for his final year. So wonder if that'll kind of hurt the Tar Heels a little bit because he'll be on a national stage with a team that travels the country all over. IMG is an area that the Tar Heels, even though they have been in the running for some guys that have gone there before, they've never actually been able to land a prospect that has played at IMG Academy. So it'll be interesting to note his recruitment over the next couple of months. Again, top 15, so he's not really too far along in his recruitment, but good to see that the Tar Heels are in the running at a position where they are looking as if they are going to probably take multiple guys at offensive tackle, even if they get Zack Rice. So definitely something to monitor there on those fronts. And of course, we'll end it with our last storyline. This one, not really not that much of a storyline, but just really in case you didn't know, Tar Heels creeping up on spring ball. It is set to start on March 23rd. That is 19 days away from the start of recording. And I'll lead into talking about the website with that. That means that we are going to start our coverage for spring ball, so we're going to have plenty of great stuff on the website for you guys, a lot of great opinionated articles. We'll tell you, of course, about some of the best battles to watch when spring ball kicks off, some of the guys that we expect could have a breakout spring, could make a big-time impact, all that kind of stuff, your top headlines heading in, all that kind of stuff will be on the website at HeelToughBlog.com. Of course, we'll be keeping you updated on the recruiting trail as well, everything NFL draft when it's related to the former Tar Heels. And then we will also have you covered as we start to creep back towards the start of the regular season as they go throughout the summer and everything like that. Also on the website, you got basketball coverage. As of right now, the Tar Heels, still in the tournament. They do play Duke this weekend. Some great coverage that we'll have on the website for that, so make sure you guys check that out. We'll have you covered wire to wire with that. Josh is going to write the preview for that one. I believe Sarah Wiley's still on her vacation to Colorado. Hope she's enjoying that. So Josh is going to be taking you through. I'm not sure if she'll be back for the ACC tournament, but if not, he'll be taking you through that too. But he's definitely got you covered for the Duke game with the preview. He'll have the recap as well. A whole bunch of reaction from that game before, of course, the Tar Heels head to Greensboro to try to keep themselves in the NCAA tournament and avoid missing the NCAA tournament officially for the first time since 2010. And then, of course, we've got you covered on the baseball side of things as well. Weekly recaps each week of how the Tar Heels are doing. And boy, they're off to a fantastic start on the diamond. So far, 6-1 on the season. The only loss coming in that final game of this past week's series with Virginia, but 2 out of 3 against one of the nation's top teams, one of the ACC preseason favorites. So we'll have you covered on that front as well as that exciting young team continues their journey throughout the season. Of course, for the podcast, make sure that you guys rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. And if you're watching this on Facebook, make sure that you like and follow the Facebook page. That's also a way to be able to check out all the articles. It'll all be in one place. Article, podcast, all that stuff will be on the Facebook feed as well. So that does it for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Zack for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for listening. And as always, go Tar Heels!